Good morning and welcome to all the students who have joined today in one of the most awaited program in our campus on our online platform. I can see more than 270 students and participants from all over India have joined this program. And I'm so excited and so overwhelmed by the presence of our uh, guest of the day, as well as all the participants and students who are present over here in this program. This program is more important because of the presence of all the participants, because of the presence of my colleagues in court, my colleagues as in bench and at bar and in my law school, my students who are in the first year of their BA, LLB and LLB. But this program is more special and more important and has its own significance and relevance and importance in the life of all of us, not only because we belong to a particular gender, but because we all belong to a humanity. We all human beings, and human beings are not selfish in nature. Human beings by its nature, by its own aptitude and by its own behavior, is someone who cares for the universe, for itself, for all the genders, for the animals, for the plants, for the life of the air and water. Not because this is something useful, not because this is something which is important, not because this is something uh, which is meaningful to the life of the human being, but also because this is how a human being itself is a part of this universe. So we are today in the universe of uh, women rights, which is one of the most important rights for the existence of this humanity. We say that uh, women are the one with whom God gave us the birth in this life. I am son of my mother, uh, and I have been in this world because of my mother, not because of any other way. None of us have been delivered in on this earth uh, directly as a revelation from the sky or from anywhere. We are all born of a woman. So we are supposed to respect the most important, the first right that arises for any human being is the right of the fetus. And the right of the fetus is actually the right which is endowed, which is attached to the right of the women. If we go through the judgment of Roe versus Wade, Planned Parenthood versus Cassie, uh, and Halstead, the most recent judgment of the Supreme Court of America, Whole Women's Health versus Halstead, and all those four most important cases which are delivered by the Supreme Court of America with respect to the right of the women. And if we go by the history of the Roe case, which is the most landmark, a historical case which changed the legal regime of American legal system. I mean, everywhere it was so important. So all the debate in that case went on to become the rights of the law which was contested over there at that time. I'm saying that uh, there is no right that become as important as the right of the women in this world. Because by protecting the right of the women, we are actually trying to protect the whole humanity. We are actually trying to protect the whole universe. We are actually trying to protect all the rights which are going to be protected for the whole humanity in its own life. So, one of the important aspect and perspective of the life of women is its uh, presence at workplace. Because be it the workplace in own house, be it the workplace in out of the house, be it the workplace online, be it the workplace offline, be it the workplace of the domestic workers, be it the workplace of the advocates, judges, from the district court to the Supreme Court. be it the workplace of the IAS officers, of the IPS officers, of the army, coming across a lot of issues. I mean, a women uh, mm, delivered a baby 14 days back to office as an IAS officer. A woman who has been contesting a case in the court, in the High Court, with respect to what kind of promotion strategies are adopted for the Air Force workers, women workers. So today we are going to talk not in general about the rights of women, which is a bigger, a kind of a molecular right in the name, if we go by the Ophidian definition. The right of women is a molecular right, is a bigger right. But we are going to talk specifically about a very specific, a very atomic right, which is the right of the women at workplace, and how we have to protect this right from different versions, different areas, different ways. So that's how we are just trying to make sure that by this awareness program, today's session, we are trying that all genders, be it male or female, all ages, be it tender, youth, or young, or teenager, or mature, or old age, or whatever it may be, everyone has to understand the area of work, the way women, which is the most who is the most important person in the life of this universe, have to be respected, has to be given a space, have to be adhered to, not only the rules and laws which are made for this purpose, but also in a moral ways, in a moral sense, whatever has been the most dignified way that is required to keep women's dignity and health and life and its respect to be protected. And all this is done not only for the women itself, but also for the holistic right which we actually create and protect for the whole humanity. I'm so overwhelmed and so enthused by the presence of approximately 300 persons today in this session. And it is all because of the topic that we have taken. And it is all because of the importance of this particular right in the life of all of us. Because at one point of time, we are the son of a woman. We are brother of a woman. We are husband of a woman. We are father of a woman. So a male is connected with four dimensions, all four dimensions. A male is connected, is tried to be conveyed by the creator, that you have all four dimensions to protect the right of the women. By no dimension, a male or anyone, by any means, any way, or any administrative, legal, social, political, democratic, diplomatic, any way, the right of the women, the dignity of the women can never be violated in any case, in any field, from the case of the earlier cases in the Indian legal history of Indian Airlines case, or the latest cases which are pending in the Delhi High Court. Before I take up the session further, I will stop here and request my team members, my team members, the students who are here, to speak the profile of our guests who are present today. I would request Ms. Mansi Rana to kindly introduce our guest of the day, Ms. Diksha Shri. Ms. Mansi Rana.
Good morning. Ms. Diksha Shri is Secretary at District Legal Services Authority at Mathura. She's an epitome of hard work and intelligence. Ma'am is a gold medalist in MTech from IIT Gwalior. She has served at the most reputed Navratna public sector undertaking, Hindustan Aeronautical Limited at Bangalore, for 4 years at its IT department. She then left her job to pursue law from Lloyd Law College in the year 2011. She graduated in law in the year 2014 from Lloyd as a rank holder and was a silver medal winner. She then appeared for ACS Judicial in 2015 and thereto secured 38th position in her first attempt to this examination and is presently posted as Secretary, District Legal Services Authority at Mathura. It's a matter of pride to have you here, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Mansi. I would request Ms. Ishika to kindly speak the profile of Sushil sir.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Sushil Kumar comes from Paliyakaran, Lakhimpur Kheri. After completing his BSc from Bareilly, Mr. Kumar went ahead to finish his LLB from Lucknow University in the year 2003. He has been a brilliant student and he cleared his APO exam in 2004. On serving as an APO for 5 years, he further went ahead to clear PCS Judicial in 2010. Sir has served as Civil Judge, Metropolitan Magistrate, ACGM, CGM, and presently he is the Secretary of District Legal Service Authority, GLSA, Gautam Buddha Nagar. We are privileged and honored to have you amongst us, sir.
Ms. Dinah, kindly speak the profile of Sanjay Vashishtha, sir.
Good morning, sir. Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, after pursuing his LLB honors from Jamia Millia Islamia, pursued LLM from McGill University, Canada in comparative law and a second master MSc in criminology and criminal justice from the prestigious University of Oxford. Mr. Vashisht is an awardee of the Exceptional Bar Council of India Scholarship, of the St. Cross University of Oxford Scholarship, amongst other prestigious awards. He has presented papers and published extensively in reputed international and national journals such as International Journal of Criminology, Oxford. He has also authored online courses for Eastern Book Company, SEC. At present, Mr. Sanjay Vashisht is practicing law at the Supreme Court of India, Delhi High Court, National Company Law Tribunal, and is also serving as a special counsel and presenting officer for the National Law University, Delhi. He is a member of the Innocence Project Canada and Indian Police Institute and Foundation. Mr. Vashisht is a human rights activist actively involved in promoting rule of law across India and beyond. It is an honor to have you amongst us, sir.
I request Ms. Khurrat to kindly speak the profile of our Professor Arushi Dhawan, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Ms. Arushi Dhawan has done her BA LLB from Lucknow University and her Master's from Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur, with specialization in corporate laws. Ms. Dhawan has also completed a certificate course in cyber laws from Government Law College, Bombay, and has qualified both UGC NET and AIB exams. Presently, ma'am is pursuing her PhD from Gujarat National Law University, Gandhinagar. She has practiced as an advocate in various courts of Delhi for approximately 2 years, post which she worked with MET University as assistant professor. Currently, Ms. Dhawan is associated with Lloyd Law College as an assistant professor. She has research papers published in both national and international journals and has attended both national and international law seminars and conferences. We are glad to have you amongst us, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mansi, Ms. Khurrat, Ms. Ishika, and Ms. Dinah for wonderful introduction of our guests today. I would now hand over the session to our moderator of the day and one of the speakers of the panel, Professor Arushi Dhawan, ma'am. Arushi, ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. A very good morning to all present here. I, Arushi Dhawan, take this opportunity on behalf of Lloyd Law College to welcome you all to today's online awareness social program. The topic for today's discussion is rights of women with special emphasis on Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013. Human rights are women's rights and human rights are human rights once and for all, as said by Hillary Clinton. We all are entitled to human rights. These human rights include the right to live free from violence and discrimination. But across the globe, women still face discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. Gender inequality underpins many problems such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and many others. For many years, women rights movements have fought hard to address this inequality, campaigning to changing laws or taking to the streets for the demand of their rights. Even under the international law, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, 1979, is considered to be a key international treaty addressing gender discrimination and providing specific protection for women's rights. The convention sets out an international Bill of Rights for women and girls and defines the obligations that the state has to adhere in order to ensure that the women can enjoy these rights. The convention has been ratified by over 180 states, including India. It might seem like an obvious point, but the fact remains the same, that we cannot have a free and equal society until everyone is free and equal, until women enjoy the same rights as men. This inequality shall persist. According to the United Nations, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is not just a goal in itself, but a key to sustainable development, economic growth, peace, and security. Although grassroots movements have done so much to bring a change, but it is only when everyone comes together to support women's rights that we can stand much stronger. Sexual harassment means what? It means any unwelcome sexual behavior. This could be physical conduct, advances, demanding or requesting sexual favors, or in using inappropriate sexual language. In India, the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013 was enforced with the basic objective to provide protection against sexual harassment of women at workplace and for the prevention and redressal of the complaints of sexual harassment and for the matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Now, I may please request Ms. Diksha Shri, Secretary DLSA, Mathura, to enlighten our students on the topic, what constitutes sexual harassment in law, a brief overview of the Act. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Arushi. A very good morning to all of you, and a special good morning to all the students from Lloyd Law College. Before I begin, I will say my thanks to my alma mater that what I am today, Lloyd Law College has played a very important role. So this is a special occasion for me as well to be a part of this program. Thanks to the management of Lloyd Law College for bringing me to this platform. Now, before I just move on to the topic, I would like to just briefly tell you all about what District Legal Services is all about. District Legal Services Authority are established for each district in India under the Legal Services Authority Act of 1987. The main objective is to provide free legal aid to poor and needy. And it is also responsible for spreading awareness amongst the masses regarding the various legislations that are enacted. We also have a mediation center at the district courts for resolution of the disputes amicably through the process of mediation. And also we are responsible for conduction of Lok Adalats at regular intervals in the district court premises, whereby petty offenses, small cases are resolved amicably by compromise between the parties. Just for your knowledge, and also like on 18th tomorrow, a day after, we are having a micro Lok Adalat with respect to criminal offenses, and on 1st of November we are having a Lok Adalat for family disputes as well as for the criminal offenses that can be resolved through the Lok Adalats. Now it is in this background that I am here in front of you to take a session and create awareness regarding the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013. Before I move on to the provisions or what the Act is all about, a little introduction or a background to this Act. as the earlier speakers have said and Professor Arushi had introduced, the fundamental rights of women to equality are guaranteed under the Article 14 and 15 of the Constitution, and her right to live with dignity is guaranteed under Article 21. And these rights are the basic and fundamental rights of each individual. The rights of these women are violated if any act of sexual harassment occurs with her. In the absence of any legislation for the protection of women at workplace from sexual harassment, we had the famous Vishakha guidelines, which were given by the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Vishakha and others versus the state of Rajasthan. This judgment was delivered by the Honorable Supreme Court in August 1997, and it provided the basic guidelines, basic definitions of sexual harassment at workplace, and also provided for guidelines to deal with it. So before we had this act, we had the Vishakha guidelines. Also, we had the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in the Delhi gang rape case of 2012, after which Justice Verma Committee was formulated. And by adopting the Vishakha guidelines and the recommendations of Justice Verma Committee, the Parliament had enacted this particular act, the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, in the year 2013, along with its rules. Now this act supersedes the Vishakha guidelines and guidelines for prevention of the sexual harassment, which was introduced by the Supreme Court. And this statute extends to the whole of India. And this act provides for the protection of women at workplace. So let us figure out what are the learning objectives out of this program. What I will be telling you from that, first we'll try to understand what is sexual harassment. Then we'll try to understand what are the different types of sexual harassment and how do we identify that an act of sexual harassment has happened to us. And then finally the redressal mechanism, how to file the complaint, and what all committees and etc. are there available for redressing of this grievance. So with this act, we need to understand that what is sexual harassment, who is an aggrieved woman, and what is a workplace. To start, I can say that this act in section 3 provides that no women shall be subjected to sexual harassment at any workplace. And the preamble to this act reads that an act to provide protection against sexual harassment of women at workplace and for the prevention and redressal of complaints of sexual harassment and matters connected thereto. So first of all, I will just tell you what is a workplace. Workplace is any place which is visited by the employee arising out or during the course of the employment. The workplace covers all the organizations, whether government or private, semi-government, non-governmental organization, sports institutions. Most importantly, even the dwelling houses are included, means the household workers are also included. And any outbound trainings, training sessions, travel for office purposes, everything is included in the definition of a workplace. So once we know what is a workplace, the most important thing to understand is that what is sexual harassment under this act. As you all know that when this act was enacted, we also got the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013, which introduced section 354A also to the Indian Penal Code, which is a penal provision for the offense of sexual harassment. The difference here is that this is the sexual harassment at workplace, and there it covers all types of sexual harassment at any place. Now, what is sexual harassment? Section 2N as well as Section 3 Clause 2 of this Act provides tries to provide for what all is included in sexual harassment. If I say Section 2N, it talks about unwelcome acts or behavior, whether they are direct or by implication, physical contact, advances, demand or request for sexual favor, making sexually colored remarks, or any other unwelcome physical, verbal or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. I think the first 3-4 points are quite clear in themselves. I would just like to elaborate upon the last one. any other unwelcome, physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. First of all, what is important for an act to be an act of sexual harassment is that it should be an unwelcome act. When somebody says that it is unwelcome, means that it should be clearly communicated to the harasser, whether verbally or in writing, that what he is doing, the conduct that he's doing, is making you uncomfortable and you want it to stop right now. So our conduct is not sexual harassment if it is welcome. If somebody passes a sexually colored remark and you are okay with that, then it is not an act of sexual harassment. Now this is what is unwelcome, and the importance of communicating that it is unwelcome to the person who is doing it. Next thing is that it can be verbal, visual, or physical. For example, I can say in case of verbal or written, they can be comments, like comments about the clothing, about the person's body, behavior, requests for sexual favors, telling rumors about a person's personal or sexual life, sending emails or text messages of sexual nature. Physical includes assault, like blocking your movement, inappropriate touching of the body, trying to kiss, hugging, patting, and stroking. Visual includes posters, drawings, pictures, screensavers, emails, or text of a sexual nature. Very important part is that even the sexual harassment can be non-verbal, like if somebody is looking up and down your body in a derogatory way or making facial expressions of sexual nature, then yes, it is an act of sexual harassment. We understand that it is unwelcome. We understand that it can be verbal, visual, and physical. Now, the next thing we need to understand is that what should be the effect of that act. That if the effect of that act should be that that act of sexual harassment should affect the female's working condition or should create a hostile working environment. I would elaborate about this. And one more important thing, that the impact is more important than the intent. Just one single incident or one single comment might not be sexual harassment, but a series of small incidents coming together will become an act of sexual harassment. Means the conduct of the harasser should be either severe or pervasive to be classified as sexual harassment. Although a single unwanted request for a date or one sexually suggestive comment might offend you, or it may be inappropriate for you, but it still may not be sexual harassment. However, a number of relatively minor separate incidents may add up to form sexual harassment if the incidents are affecting your work environment. So the effect is that your work environment is affected and a hostile work environment is created because of those acts. One more aspect to this, non-sexual conduct. I talked about that the conduct should be of sexual nature, but even a non-sexual conduct may become sexual harassment. For example, if you are harassed because you are a female rather than a male, like somebody says, like it happens, it may be sexual harassment if you are a woman working as a carpenter on an all-male job, and you are the only female, you are the only person whose tools are frequently hidden by your male co-workers. Here no act of sexual nature is happening, but still a hostile working environment or an uncomfortable environment is being created just because you are a female. So this will definitely be an act of sexual harassment. Now, the forms of workplace sexual harassment, two types. Quid pro quo, that is this for that, means explicit or implicit promise or a preferential or detrimental treatment in employment. If your employer says that if you do this, then I will give you a promotion, or if you do not do this, then it might be detrimental to your employment, then such things are an act of sexual harassment. Implied or expressed threat about her present or future employment status. And the second is hostile work environment, which I just told you. A few examples is making sexual advances or demanding sexual favors, singing embarrassing sexually toned songs, cracking jokes which cause awkwardness or embarrassment, discrimination on the basis of gender, like saying you're just a woman, we need a man for this assignment. Making babies is all you women are good for. Making obscene gestures, or maybe trying to touch your body, saying, "Arey beta, you are like my beti, and I am there to help you." It might make you uncomfortable and it might continue for long, then yes, this is an act of sexual harassment. The more obvious ones are molestation and physical assault, which everyone can understand that, yes, this is an act of sexual harassment. Standing too close, trying to touch your body, that is an act of sexual harassment. So in short, workplace sexual harassment is when the behavior is unwelcome, of a sexual nature. You get a subjective experience and it impacts your working environment. It creates a hostile environment, and the intention is not important. The impact is what that matters. And sexual harassment is a real serious criminal offense. There are a few other also provisions of IPC, like 354, 294, 509, 354B, 354C. I will not go into these sections. You can read for yourself. But because our focus will be on this act today. So once we understand what is a workplace and we understand what is sexual harassment, then we move on to the third concept that we need to understand is who is an aggrieved woman. Who is an aggrieved woman? So section 2 of this act provides that aggrieved woman means in a relation to a workplace, a woman of any age, whether employed or not, who alleges to have been subjected to any act of sexual harassment by the respondent. And most importantly, it also deals with a dwelling house wherein a woman of any age who is employed there in such a dwelling house is covered. So an aggrieved woman can be on permanent employment, ad hoc or temporary basis. But if she's subjected to an act of sexual harassment, then she's an aggrieved woman in respect of this act. Now, who is responsible and accountable for the prevention of the sexual harassment under this act? This act mandates that the employer has to provide a safe working environment at the workplace, which shall include safety from persons coming into contact at workplace, and it shall be the duty of the employer to look into the fact that the workplace is safe from sexual harassment. There are several duties that the employer is given under this act. The most important being, now I will talk about how the complaint has to be filed and what is the redressal mechanism. So first of all, you need to understand that we have got the internal complaints committee and a local complaints committee. It is mandated by this act that any organization which has got at least 10 employees has to have an internal complaints committee. And the internal complaints committee has to consist of a presiding officer and 2 members from amongst the employees and 1 member from amongst the non-governmental organizations. 50% of the strength should be women. And similarly, for those organizations which have less than 10 workers, so they cannot create an internal complaints committee. So we have got the local complaints committee of at the district level. There's a district officer who's of the rank of district magistrate or additional district magistrate. Now this local complaints committee also has got a chairperson, 1 member nominated from women, and 2 member who are nominated from amongst non-governmental organizations who are committed to the cause of women. So with this constitution, we understand what is an internal complaints committee, and it is a mandatory provision. If there's a violation of this provision, like if the employer does not create an internal complaints committee by a written order, then he can be punished with a fine up to ₹50,000. And also for the contravention to any of the provisions of the act, the employer can be punished with a fine up to ₹50,000. Now, sexual harassment, the complaint can be filed by the aggrieved woman, and also if she's mentally incapable, by her relative, friend, a guardian, or any person who has the information about the incident with the written consent of the woman. In case of physical incapacity, her relative, friend, or co-worker, or any person who has information about the incident with the written consent of the woman can file a complaint. Now, this complaint is filed before the internal complaints committee, and this complaint needs to be filed within 3 months from the occurrence of the incident. And suppose if there are a series of incidents happening, then 3 months from the last incidents that had happened. What is important that if you are working at any place, a workplace, then as a female, you should always take a note of the date, time, who was the harasser, his designation, what act he did, and how frequently that is happening to you. Because whenever you need to file any complaint, then these details have to be mentioned in the complaint once it is given to the internal complaints committee. If there are any witnesses to that incident, then you can also keep a note of that. So since many students are from Lloyd, or whoever are listening to this program, all of you will be going to a workplace. Whether you are a male or a female, you should be very well aware of this act. And for a female, you should know, you should be able to understand and identify whenever an act of sexual harassment is happening with you. And the males, for them, they should know which all acts will comprise an act of sexual harassment, so that you can prevent yourself from doing such an act. And you should understand that it is a punishable offense, both under the IPC, and strict action can be taken under this act. So whenever a complaint comes before an internal complaints committee, if the consent, like if suppose mentally incapable, if she is, then the consent can be obtained by an ex-friend or a guardian. And in case in case death happens to that person, then the consent has to be given by the legal heir. Now, the complaint, as I told, should contain the name of the contravenor, the complainant name, date, time, location of the incident, what was the relationship with the person, and names and addresses of any of the witnesses to that act. Now, once the complaint is received by the internal complaints committee, it has to review the complaint and ensure that it has got all the information, the conduct, what was the conduct of the respondent towards the complainant, and what incident, whether the incident occurred in a workplace or not. So then the notice of this complaint is sent to the respondent, and the chairperson or the presiding officer of the committee sends a notice to the other members also. The act mandates that before institution of an inquiry based upon that complaint, the committee should ensure that the respondent and the complainant are brought to the process of conciliation first. So that might be that the matter may get resolved, bringing the respondent and the complainant together for the process of conciliation. This is provided under Section 10 of this Act. So once they undergo the process of conciliation and the report is submitted to the internal complaints committee, then if it is found that no conciliation works between them, an inquiry will be conducted based upon the complaint. The committee will proceed to question the complainant, the respondent, any of the witnesses that are mentioned by the complainant in the written complaint. What is important is that this inquiry should be completed within a period of 90 days from receipt of the complaint, and the report should be submitted within 10 days after the completion of the inquiry to the employer in case of internal complaints committee, and in case of local complaints committee, the report has to be submitted to the district officer. Very important that the principles of natural justice should be followed while conducting the inquiry, and fair hearing, fair play, and reasoned orders are a part of this inquiry as well. This act also provides for interim measures. It provides for interim measures that in case that act of sexual harassment is ongoing, then at the written request of the women, the complaints committee can recommend to restrain the respondent from reporting on work performance of the aggrieved woman, or writing or supervising her academic activities. The complaints committee can also recommend that the respondent is transferred or the complainant is transferred to some other place, or the complainant or respondent are maybe allowed to take a leave. So these are the interim measures that are provided. Then once the inquiry is conducted and the internal committee or the local committee arrives at the conclusion that the allegation against the respondent has been proved, it shall recommend to the employer or the district officer to take an action for sexual harassment as a misconduct in accordance with the provisions of the service rules that are applicable to the respondent. And second thing, which is very important, is to deduct from the salary or wages of the respondent such sum which the committee thinks appropriate to be paid to the aggrieved woman or to her legal heirs. These deductions, they are the determination of these deductions, or you can say compensation to the aggrieved woman. They are determined as per the section 15 of this act, and the committee considers the mental trauma, pain and suffering or emotional distress that the aggrieved woman has gone through, the loss in career opportunity due to the incident of sexual harassment, medical expenses incurred by the victim for physical and psychiatric treatment, the income and financial status of the respondent, and the feasibility of such payment in lump sum or in installments. So this is a very important feature of this act. And as you all know, that victim compensation scheme is very well prevalent for all the offenses, especially the offenses related to women. And we have got section 357 in CRPC. So likewise, we have the provision of interim compensation, or maybe at the time of adjudication, the compensation can be awarded to the aggrieved woman. We all understand that whenever there is a law, there can be a misuse of the law as well. So this act is vigilant about this also. And there is a provision for punishment for false and malicious complaints also. Like this act cannot be misused by any woman against a man indiscriminately. So section 14 provides that if the complaints committee arrives at the conclusion that the allegation which is made against the respondent is malicious, or the aggrieved woman or any other person who's making the complaint has made the complaint with the knowledge, knowing the fact that it is false, there the committee shall recommend for action to be taken against that woman or the complainant in accordance with the provisions of the service rules that are applicable to the woman or the complainant. So this is a very thought about provision of this act. And as I told you that there is penalty for non-compliance of the provisions of the act. This is provided under section 26. This is the penalty for the employer. Penalty for the employer if he fails to constitute an internal complaints committee or take actions in accordance with the act, or contravenes or attempts to contravene the provisions of the act, then he can be punished with a fine which may extend up to 50,000 rupees. Section 354A of IPC provides for a punishment for the acts of sexual harassment, but that it can be that act can be at any place. Now, one more thing I need to tell you is the cognizance of the offense by the courts. This act under section 27 provides that no court shall take cognizance of any offense which is punishable under this act or the rules made thereunder, except upon a complaint which is made in writing by the aggrieved woman or any other person authorized by the internal committee in its behalf to the court. And the court having jurisdiction in this case is a court of a metropolitan magistrate or judicial magistrate, first class, and every offense under this act is a non-cognizable offense. So this is briefly what I would like to tell you about this act. One more thing, the confidentiality is also maintained. The contents of the complaint, there's a prohibition of publication or making known the contents of the complaint or the inquiry proceedings. In general, this is prohibited by section 16 of the act, and consequences are a fine of up to 55,000 can be collected for the employer. If a person is aggrieved by the orders of the complaints committee, or in case of non-implementation of the orders, then he can file or she can file a complaint, an appeal with the appropriate authority, and the party can also see justice to the regular court of justice. So this is all I would like to tell you about this act. And I urge from this platform to all the women who are listening to me to be aware and vigilant about their rights, and to take a call whenever such thing happens to them, to bring it to the notice of the Human Resources Department of their organization, as well as to the Internal Complaints Committee. And it is a mandate that there should be an Internal Complaints Committee. If no Internal Complaints Committee is present with your organization, then that also can be reported and the employer can be punished accordingly. Thank you all for your patient listening. I hope I could disseminate some relevant information about this act. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening the audience regarding the, first of all, the objective and the role of the District Legal Services Authority that we have in India. Thereafter, a very important discussion that you discussed about the Vishakha judgment, which stands as the landmark judgment whenever we talk about the sexual harassment, because that was the act which gave us the guidelines, basically, which we followed and made the ad as well, as you said. And thereafter, what actually constitutes the sexual harassment? What can be said to be sexual harassment and what not? Further, the very important point that was highlighted by you was that the rights of the aggrieved woman, and at the same time, what are the rights if a person is filing a false complaint? Because as you mentioned it rightly, that we tend to misuse the laws also. So thank you so much, ma'am, for briefing the students and the audience regarding the same. It was a pleasure listening to you. Now may I please invite Mr. Sushil Kumar, Secretary, District Legal Services Authority, Gautam Buddha Nagar, to enlighten us on the topic socio-administrative causes and socio-legal cures for crime against women at the workplace in India. Over to you, sir.
थैंक यू मैम। सबसे पहले तो मैं लॉयड कॉलेज और मैनेजमेंट को धन्यवाद दूंगा कि उन्होंने मुझे इस फोरम पे महिलाओं के जो वर्क प्लेस पे जो अपराध होते हैं उसके बोलने के लिए मुझे आमंत्रित किया है। आज के दौर में जो सबसे ज्वलंत मुद्दा है महिलाओं के संदर्भ में, कि चाहे वो घर हो चाहे वो वर्क प्लेस हो, उनके साथ जो दुर्व्यवहार हो रहा है, सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट हो रहा है, हम इस पे चर्चा करते हैं तो चर्चा में ये निकल के आता है कि कहीं ना कहीं से जो हमारी सोच उनके प्रति नकारात्मक बनी हुई है, या जो सोच हमारी है, तो कहीं ना कहीं हम इतिहास को देखते हैं। अगर हम अपने इतिहास को देखते हैं तो हमारा जो हड़प्पा सभ्यता है, जो जहाँ से कहा गया कि हमारी सभ्यता स्टार्ट हुई है, तो उस समय तक महिलाओं को बड़े ही पूजनीय दृष्टिकोण से देखा जाता था। जैसा कि आर्कियोलॉजिकल डिपार्टमेंट हो या हम इतिहास पढ़ते हैं तो पाते हैं कि उस समय तक मात्र सत्तात्मक व्यवस्था थी। मात्र सत्तात्मक व्यवस्था से मतलब यह है कि जो भी कानून नियम बनते थे महिलाओं को केंद्र बिंदु में रख के बनाए जाते थे और उनको बड़े ही सम्मानीय दृष्टिकोण से देखा जाता था और उनको सभी प्रकार के अधिकार प्राप्त थे, चाहे वो संपत्ति में अधिकार हो, चाहे वो राजनीति का हो, सामाजिक हो। लेकिन कालांतर में बहुत से परिवर्तन आए, जैसे कि मध्यकालीन भारत में। उन घटनाओं का जिक्र करना तो उचित नहीं होगा, लेकिन बस चूंकि इस पे बोलना है कि कैसे एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव काजेज कौन कौन से हैं, प्रशासनिक कारण कौन कौन से हैं, जिसके कारण से इस प्रकार की घटनाएं हो रही हैं। तो जब हम मध्यकालीन भारत में आते हैं तो पाते हैं कि महिलाओं की स्थितियों में काफी गिरावट आई। जैसे एक सती प्रथा आई, जो समाज में कुरीतियां आई। सती प्रथा है, बाल विवाह है, विधवा पुनर्विवाह पे प्रतिषेध लगाया गया, महिलाओं को संपत्ति में अधिकार नहीं था, पर्दा प्रथा आई। जब हम आते हैं 19वीं शताब्दी में, तो चाहे राजा राम मोहन राय साहब हुए हों, बाल गंगाधर तिलक हुए हों और आधुनिक भारत के जो निर्माता थे, उन्होंने इस पे अंकुश लगाने का प्रयास किया और इस चीज का विरोध किया। अल्टीमेटली जो आज हम गवर्न हो रहे हैं, हमारा जो आधुनिक भारत में संविधान निर्मित हुआ है, उसमें महिलाओं को बराबरी का अधिकार दिया गया। वो चाहे अधिकार संवैधानिक हो, मौलिक हो, उनको बराबरी का दर्जा दिया गया। लेकिन सच्चाई ये है कि आज भी उसको वास्तविक मूर्त रूप नहीं दिया जा पा रहा है। शायद इसके पीछे जो मंशा है या हमारी मेंटालिटी है, जो हम अपने वही इतिहास की बात आएगी, कहीं ना कहीं से हम भी इसके लिए लायबल हैं। एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव एजेंसी की बात है तो इसके जीता जागता उदाहरण ये है कि जो जिसपे हम आज डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, महिलाओं के प्रति जो वर्क प्लेस पे अपराध होता है, उनके साथ यौन दुर्व्यवहार होता है, सबसे जीता जागता उदाहरण है कि 1992 का केस है, जो विशाखा एक एनजीओ थी और राजस्थान में जयपुर के पास में जो कुछ लैंडलॉर्ड थे पावरफुल, उन्होंने एक गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉई थी जो वोमेन डेवलपमेंट के लिए काम कर रही थी। 92 बात है, 92 की। विशेष रूप से बाल विवाह का इन्होंने विरोध किया, बाल विवाह का विरोध किया, कैंपेनिंग चलाई, इनके साथ गैंग रेप किया गया 92 में। और इस मामले में लोअर कोर्ट ने जो मुल्जिमान थे, एक्यूज थे, उनको साक्ष्य के अभाव में बरी कर दिया गया। विशाखा एक एनजीओ थी, उसकी कुछ एक्टिविस्ट थी, उन्होंने इस मामले को सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चैलेंज किया। ऑनरेबल सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बड़े ही संजीदगी से इस मामले को देखा और जो महिलाओं के बारे में पाया कि जो इस समय वर्तमान में आईपीसी में कानून है वो पर्याप्त नहीं है, उस कानून की दिशा में उन्होंने गाइडलाइन दी 97 में गाइडलाइन दी। और ये एक्ट जो बना है 2013 में बना है, यानी लगभग 15-16 साल लग गए। 15-16 साल लगने का मतलब है कि कहीं ना कहीं से हम फेल्योर हो रहे हैं, हमारी एजेंसियां फेल्योर हो रही हैं, चाहे गवर्नमेंट हो, चाहे वो संसद ने इतना समय लगाया इनेक्टमेंट करने में। इसी प्रकार से एक निर्भया कांड हुआ 2012 में, दिल्ली में गैंग रेप हुआ। लोअर कोर्ट ने 2013 में इसमें जजमेंट दे दिया, लेकिन शायद उच्चतर न्यायपालिका में आते आते 4 साल लग गए। और बाद में इधर भी काफी जो भी गवर्नमेंट एजेंसी थी, उनकी वजह से काफी लेट हुआ मामले में। और 2000 शायद लास्ट ईयर कन्विक्शन हुआ। कहने का मतलब यह है कि हमारे यहाँ कानून तो बहुत अच्छे बन गए, लेकिन उसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन प्रॉपर नहीं हो पा रहा है। शायद इसके पीछे सोच है, अपनी सोच में बदलाव लाना होगा। जो महिलाओं के प्रति पुरुषों की सोच है, उसमें बदलाव होना जरूरी है। कोई कानून तभी तक अपेक्षाओं में पूरा हो पाएगा जब हम अपनी सोच में बदलाव लाएंगे। निर्भया कांड के बाद ये रेखांकित किया गया कि महिलाओं के प्रति पुरुषों की सोच में बदलाव जरूरी है, लेकिन शायद इस पे ध्यान नहीं दिया गया। उसी का एक परिणाम है कि आज अपराध हो रहे हैं। ऐसा नहीं कि अपराध पहले भी होते थे, आज भी हो रहे हैं, लेकिन कुछ लोगों का कहना है कि शायद रिपोर्टिंग ज्यादा हो रही है, इसलिए ऐसा हो रहा है। ये एक बात सही हो सकती है, लेकिन रिपोर्टिंग का अपना एक अलग है मसला है, दुष्कर्म का अपराध एक सामाजिक अपराध है जिसकी जड़ें हमारी सोच में निहित हैं और कानून की अपेक्षा मेरा अपना मानना है कि हमें अपनी सोच में बदलाव लाना होगा। जब तक हम अपनी सोच में बदलाव नहीं लाएंगे तब तक शायद कानून अपने लक्ष्यों को प्राप्त नहीं कर पाएगा। वैसे तो दीक्षा जी ने अभी बता ही दिया है कि जो सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट क्या है, और इससे पहले भी बताया गया। जहां तक सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट की बात है वो यही है कि फिजिकल जो कंडक्ट एंड एडवांसेज हैं, ए डिमांड आर रिक्वेस्ट ऑफ सेक्सुअल फेवर, और पॉइंट हैं मेकिंग सेक्सुअलिटी कलर्ड रिमार्क्स, शोइंग पोर्नोग्राफी। सबसे महत्वपूर्ण जो इस विशाखा गाइडलाइन में मेल जो था, जो हमने देखा, उसको पढ़ा थोड़ा सा, जो समझ में आया, जो कंसेंट की बात आती है। कभी कभी ऐसा होता है किसी फेवर के लिए कोई फेवर करना, और उस फेवर के लिए अगर कंसेंट ली गई है और वो विशेष परिस्थितियों में कंसेंट ली गई है तो कंसेंट नहीं मानी जाएगी। यहाँ पर इसको हम डिफाइन करना चाहेंगे, जैसे कि किसी एम्प्लॉय, वुमेन एम्प्लॉय है, उसको किसी बात के फेवर करने के लिए उसकी कंसेंट किसी बात के लिए ले ली गई है, और जब मामला आता है कोर्ट में तो लोग डिफेंस लेते हैं कि महिला की कंसेंट थी, तो इस कंसेंट को कंसेंट नहीं माना गया है। जैसे अभी मी टू कैंपेन हुआ, तो जो भी है ये एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव काजेज हैं, उसके लिए तो हमारी सोच में बदलाव की जरूरत है। और जो सोशियो लीगल क्योर्स की बात आती है, तो मेरा अपना व्यक्तिगत विचार है कि हमें अपने बच्चों को नैतिक शिक्षा पर बल देना चाहिए, खासतौर से गवर्नमेंट को बेसिक लेवल पे यौन शिक्षा, सेक्स एजुकेशन को मैंडेटरी बनाना चाहिए सब्जेक्ट के रूप में, और बड़े ही संवेदनशील तरीके से बच्चों को पढ़ाया जाना चाहिए स्केच डायग्राम के माध्यम से, कि मेल फीमेल के जो भी एनाटोमी होती है उस पर डिस्कस होना चाहिए, जिससे बच्चे वो चीज जान सकें। जब जानेंगे तो समझेंगे, समझेंगे तो फॉलो करेंगे। शायद ये बहुत बड़ी कमी है गवर्नमेंट की, और इस पे ध्यान देना चाहिए सेक्स एजुकेशन पे एक मैंडेटरी सब्जेक्ट के रूप में। और दूसरा जो है हेल्थ एजुकेशन को मैंडेटरी बनाना जाना चाहिए। जब आदमी मानसिक रूप से स्वस्थ रहेगा तो उसके अंदर स्वस्थ विचार आते हैं, और विचारों से ही शुरुआत होती है। बच्चों को बताया जाना चाहिए, बच्चों पे निगरानी रखनी चाहिए। छोटे बच्चे जो अपने घर में होते हैं, मॉनिटरिंग करनी चाहिए कि बच्चे हमारे किसके साथ मिल रहे हैं, किससे बात कर रहे हैं, किस माहौल में जा रहे हैं। निगरानी रखनी चाहिए एक तरीके से, जो शायद हम लोग नहीं कर पा रहे हैं अपने व्यस्तता के कारण से। इसी का परिणाम है कि बहुत से ऐसे घटनाएं हो जाती हैं, लेकिन घटना का रीजन यही कि हम अपने बच्चों को और घर परिवार में जरूर देखें कि बच्चा हमारा क्या कर रहा है। और जहां तक क्योर्स की बात है, तो इसके लिए जो भी महिलाएं हैं किसी फर्म या कंपनी में सर्विस ज्वाइन कर रही हैं, तो उन पे खुल के उस मुद्दे पे बात करनी चाहिए कि मैं सर्विस, ये हमें है जो टर्म कंडीशन है, अपनी जो कंडीशन हो आने जाने की वो बता देनी चाहिए। होता है कि कभी कभी इन चीजों में मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग हो जाती है, फिर समस्याएं आती हैं। और इसके लिए जो कार्यस्थल है उस पर सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट से जो संबंधित डिफिनीशन है, और जो एक इंटरनल कमेटी अभी दीक्षा जी ने बताई कि एक बनती है, लोकल इंटरनल कमेटी बनती है, तो उस कमेटी के जो मेंबरान हैं उनके नाम, उनके फोन नंबर एक चार्ट पे बना के कार्यस्थल पर लगाए जाने चाहिए, जो सभी को विजिबल हों। वहाँ का जो मैनेजमेंट है कंपनी का, सीनियर मैनेजमेंट, उसको एंटी सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट कैंप करने चाहिए। और इन कैंप में न केवल कर्मचारी बल्कि अपर मैनेजमेंट को भी सम्मिलित होना चाहिए, ताकि वहाँ लोगों में मैसेज जाए कि जो ये कैंपेन चल रहा है, एंटी सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट जो कैंप लगाया गया है, वास्तव में बहुत ही सीरियस है। कभी कभी होता है कि ये सब खाना पूर्ति हो जाती है और लोग शायद उसको इतना सीरियस नहीं लेते हैं। जब हमारा सीनियर यूनिट होगी, जब आएगी, पार्टिसिपेट करेगी, तो लोग जागरूक होंगे कि नहीं, वास्तव में हमें इस पर सीरियसली लेना है। और तीसरा ये पॉइंट है कि जो भी महिलाएं अपने जो वर्क प्लेस पे वर्क करती हैं, उनके कलीग्स वगैरह हैं, साथ में जो या सीनियर्स हैं, कोई इनको काम असाइन किया जाता है या काम बताया जाता है, तो कोशिश करें कि वो व्हाट्सएप और स्नैपचैटिंग वगैरह थोड़ा अवॉइड करें। आपको स्पष्ट बोलना होगा बड़े ही सबमिसिव वे में कि आप मैं व्हाट्सएप ना करके आप मेल करिए। शायद ये कुछ हद तक रोकथाम इनसे लगेगी। कभी कभी इन्हीं से मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग कुछ हद तक होती है। और कंपनी के ऊपर भी ड्यूटी बनती है कि वो एक एग्जाम्पल सेट करे, हेल्दी एनवायरनमेंट क्रिएट करे, जिससे लोगों में इंटीमेसी हो। साथ ही साथ जो महिलाएं जो कार्यस्थल पर कार्य करती हैं, अगर कोई इस तरीके से कोई अनएप्रोप्रिएट कोई जोक करता है, तो निश्चित रूप से उसको मना करें पुरजोर तरीके से कि हमें ये ऐसे जोक्स पसंद नहीं है। अगर आप ऐसा कुछ नहीं करते हैं तो निश्चित रूप से सामने वाले का मनोबल बढ़ता है। इसको आप ध्यान देना होगा। यदि कोई घटना हुई है आपके साथ में, तो उस घटना को आप हाइड मत करिए, छिपाइए मत। फर्स्ट टाइम पे ही रिटर्न में आप कंप्लेंट करिए इसकी, जिससे आप में कॉन्फिडेंस तो आएगा और सामने वाले के हौसले पस्त होंगे। ये सब ऐसे पॉइंट हैं कि इन पे आपको ध्यान देना होगा। और सबसे जरूरी है कि हमें अपनी सोच में परिवर्तन लाना होगा। सच्चाई है कि थोड़ा कानून कितने भी कठोर बन जाएं, वो इतने सफल नहीं हो सकते जब तक हम अपनी सोच में परिवर्तन नहीं लाएंगे। एक कहावत है कि, एक एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ, व्हीकल या कार या गाड़ी कितनी भी अच्छी हो, जब तक उसको चलाने वाला ड्राइवर ट्रेंड नहीं है, तो निश्चित रूप से वो अपने मंजिल पे नहीं पहुंच पाती है। कहने का मतलब है कानून कितना भी अच्छा बन जाए, जो हम लोग समाज के लोग हैं, अपने सोच में बदलाव लाना होगा। बिना बदलाव के ये चीज संभव नहीं है। और मैं अपने जो लॉयड कॉलेज के जो स्टूडेंट हैं, मैं उनसे आग्रह करूंगा कि आप दूसरों के साथ वो व्यवहार करिए, चाहे वो मेल हो फीमेल हो, विशेष रूप से फीमेल के साथ में, जो आप अपने साथ चाहते हैं। कहने का मतलब है बड़े वो शब्द यूज करिए जो आपको वापस मिले, आपको आपके परिवार को तो अच्छा लगे, वो चीज यूज करिए। जो देंगे वो मिलेगा। उम्मीद करते हैं कि आप एक ऐसी जगह पे आप स्टडी कर रहे हो, आप एक आम आदमी की बच्चा बहुत पावरफुल हैं और काफी आपका समाज में उत्कृष्ट स्थान है। आप इन चीजों पे ध्यान दीजिए। जो भी आपके सहपाठी हैं उनके साथ अच्छा व्यवहार कर ही रहे होंगे निश्चित रूप से, लेकिन ये चीजें अगर आपने न लाएंगे, एक मैसेज जाएगा। बस एक चीज याद रख लीजिएगा, जो हम अपने प्रति चाहते हैं वो हम दूसरों को दें। निश्चित रूप से आप सफल नागरिक बनेंगे। और मैं मैनेजमेंट को धन्यवाद देना चाहूंगा। ठीक, थैंक यू।
Thank you so much, sir, for tracing it back to the historical times and how in India we have been putting the efforts to give the rights of the women, and also highlighting the very important, again, the Vishakha judgment, and how important it is that we all should stand together instead of just relying back on the laws that we have. And further, the most important point that was highlighted is the need of bringing the change in the implementation policies, and also adding a few new subjects that can be really helpful. I really hope that our students will work on the suggestions that were given to you that were given by you at the end. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening our students. Now, I may please request Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, to brief the students on the topic POSH, that is the Sexual Harassment Act, and the malicious prosecution, a thin line difference between disproved and unproved. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Arushi ma'am. Let me first thank Birav Director sir for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to present my views on this issue. It was indeed a pleasure getting all the insights into the subject matter by Diksha Shri Madam and Sushil Kumar sir. In fact, it seems that he has really encouraged us. And this session today comes at the backdrop of Human Rights Reports Network. So basically, the Human Rights Watch had released a report yesterday on this issue. This issue, unfortunately, has not been reported in the media. We have been very, very busy with Sushant and other issues. So somehow these issues haven't really surfaced. But Human Rights Watch yesterday came out with a report saying that we have failed to a large extent in properly implementing the provisions of this act. I understand the subject matter of my topic is a bit different, but I would want to highlight certain brief aspects of the report, which other conspicuous print and electronic media. But the report goes on to observe that our focus is limited to the 5% formal workforce, whereas majority of our population, women workforce, is in fact in the informal sector. That is, to their estimate, 195 million women. That is 95% of our workforce. Now the difficulty, I will say this as somebody who has spent considerable time with Delhi Police as a lecturer, as somebody who has been representing government in High Court, Supreme Court, and otherwise as a private practitioner. We this banner in the background on a virtual platform. We've got certain banners made, but the problem again remains with the informal sector. While we sit here in nice air-conditioned rooms with now, we do not have any laws for the informal workforce. We do not have any bylaws, policy framework for the informal workforce, and that is the need of the hour. The report highlights that. Second, the report goes on to highlight that it appears that this has now just become a procedural requirement. Compliance with prohibition of sexual harassment at workplace has somehow become a procedural requirement. So I was on the Human Rights Watch report. Problem is that we seldom highlight these issues. We do not discuss these issues. When we go to the courts, it's a different picture altogether. The report goes on to highlight that it is merely a procedural requirement now. It appears that this is nothing but a procedural requirement which is being conspicuously followed by different private bodies and private. Third aspect that I would want to highlight is about the proviso to Section 14, which Diksha Madam had highlighted at the outset.
Let me quickly run a video which is shared with me by our panelist and judicial officer, Diksha Shri Ma'am, Secretary DLSA Mathura. I will share the video right now with all of you.
So, moving forward, Crime Records Bureau has recently started recording this data. This was not being recorded. Now, the problem is when the data is not available, no criminologist can work upon the underlying issues. Data becomes a very robust mechanism to do an underlying research on a given subject matter. Starting 2016 onward, it appears that the NCRB has started to record data on this aspect, and that is one aspect which is very, very pertinent. So far as the report is concerned, this report is conspicuously available. I will share the link with all the students. It is very, very important that one go through this report as well.
Second aspect that I would want to highlight is something from my own experience. Now, we as lawyers, we as a private law firm, we also do a lot of compliance, for MNCs, for companies, where the power dynamics are such that if the abuser is at the top, it becomes very, very hard, because obviously when we talk about the internal complaints committee, there may be one external member, that is an NGO worker, but it mostly comprises of the employees from amongst the organization also. This is something which I believe urgently requires a lot of reforms. This requires a lot of deliberations and considerations. The power dynamics are required to change. The power dynamics are to be reconsidered, because let's say if the director or somebody at the rank of a CEO or someone does anything which is contrary to this law, then it is hard to perceive a scenario where the committee will actually work without any coercion or undue influence. We as compliance partners have time and again faced this issue and made certain endeavors to address them, but it is technically and in all fairness very, very difficult to address these issues unless and until there is a robust legislative provision to tackle this situation. This needs to be seen in the larger picture. Third, as a counsel for government, as a presenting officer for government, we have come across several matters where, let's say, section 14, where a complaint has been made. Now, once that complaint has been made, the complaint is adjudicated on, there is no legal representation, so the person has to be accused, has to appear in person, the complainant goes there, there are witnesses. Now, most of the workplaces are equipped with the high resolution cameras, at least in the formal metropolitan sector. We will presume or assume that the premise is equipped with high resolution cameras. Now, the problem is that once, because these crimes are either mostly indoors or are committed, if not very well planned, in a planned fashion when other witnesses or other individuals are not around. These are mostly, at least so far as my experience is concerned, committed indoors, behind corridors where there are no people available conspicuously. Now, difficulty is, let's say if there is an allegation of this kind, how do we deal with the situation? What do we do? Because again, somebody inside a room, nobody heard anything. And it is not expected that people will now start carrying cameras. They will start suddenly carrying, telephone recorders inside somebody's room, which is a private space. In most of the cases which have somehow been disproved, in most of the cases where the accused has been exonerated by the committee, where the report says that nothing substantial was found, the proviso to section 14 has been used. Both government, I wish I could screen share now. I'm using a different device. I would otherwise screen share some of our own orders and judgments where we have been appearing. Now, one of those cases, let's say, in one of the government bodies that I represent in High Court and Supreme Court, the allegation surfaced around 10:30 a.m. Now, the reporting is again an issue. I think Diksha Shri Madam had highlighted that the complaint has to be made within 3 months, which can be extended if a reasonable cause is given. Now, the complaint was given within somewhat a reasonable time frame. However, CCTV cameras were not available in this given case. The committee summoned the accused. Again, the powers are enormous. If somebody enters your workplace, he or she may not be an employee, leaves your workplace, the committee can still summon them. They have all the powers of a civil court so far as the committee is concerned. Their adequate training is a subject matter which I would want to emphasize on subsequently. Now, in this matter, the complainant came up, the accused came up with an alibi, saying that the biometrics for that day would highlight that he was not available on the alleged crime scene. He was not available, and there is no reason for any trial because he was simply not there. He was not present. The committee considered everything. His biometrics showed that he had entered. The biometrics showed that he had entered the office at 12, whereas the alleged incident occurred at 10:30 a.m. On this ground alone, he was exonerated. Proviso would say that merely non-finding of a question of fact pertaining to guilt would not make it a malicious complaint, would not be labeled as a malicious prosecution. But in this case, the alibi was that he was not present. Now, obviously, biometrics can also be, fabricated. One just entered without using the biometrics, this and that. I wouldn't say this was the case. Anyhow, the organization chose not to pursue this as a case of malicious prosecution, and eventually a writ was filed before Delhi High Court. This is recently, very, very recently. I appeared for the government body, and the issue was, why don't we investigate this, whether this was actually or indeed an attempt to maliciously prosecute the concerned accused. Now, my answer to this query was that other than the biometrics, there was no other witness. And otherwise, the timing of reporting is usually 9 a.m. And there were a couple of people who did not participate in the hearing, but they actually saw the accused around. The problem is that if malicious prosecution is encouraged and promoted, if malicious prosecution is done in every matter, then that would deter other genuine complainants from coming forward. Now, this is, as it is, a very underreported crime. The way if we look at criminological statistics, this is underreported. We know what has happened so far as malicious prosecution is concerned. We also know what has happened in the Me Too movement. We know what has really gone wrong with the Me Too movement. Now, the minute media highlights it, the minute it comes into the public domain, there are defamation suits as well. Whether defamation would lie or not is again a secondary issue. I think this should have been scrutinized by a larger bench, or a larger, or a, if not a better, but a higher judicial forum. Because what we see in Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court judge in US, the proceeding, again, media is supposed to report what is to be reported. But what happened in Kavanaugh, the US Supreme Court nominee, then nominee, now Supreme Court judge, Dr. Ford had alleged that he did certain things while he was in grade 11. Now, this happened, but there was no defamation suit. Things went pretty well after that. Again, but what has happened in the Me Too movement is that most of the accused had subsequently filed defamation suits, as and when reported in media. Now, how do we ensure, what mechanisms should we place in the provision to ensure that women who are victimized and who are actually victimized are not deterred from reporting such offenses, are not deterred by other provisions of law from reporting these offenses? Like when we talk about POXCO, it's like non-obstante act. It's as if, it supersedes every other law, but that is specific law superseding general law. That's a different dimension altogether. Could the proviso to this section 14 be further qualified? Could we come out with potential safeguards? Because what I have also witnessed, what I have learned from our compliances with other MNCs, it is the victim who seems to be worried about collecting evidence. This is not their task. It should not be burdened upon the victim to collect evidences so as to what is to be reported. Now, this is a major concern. Defamation suits which are filed for hundreds of crores of rupees, criminal defamations which have been pending now, as we see the MJ Akbar trial, the orders are reserved for 22nd of October regarding transfer. This was also a latest update. I mean, what is defamation and what is not defamation is also to be seen. Higher courts, again, it's a very complex situation. The trend that has emerged, the way I feel the higher judiciary, again, the higher judiciary is very aptly trying to maintain a balance so far as the fair trial rights of the accused versus the complainant in these aspects are concerned. They say, okay, you proceed, you also take cognizance of this complaint in that case. But again, it is discretionary. Again, even if something is to be declared as a malicious complaint, it has to be inquired upon by the committee. It can't be a finding. Lastly, what I have also realized is that the language, semantics, and the narrative which flows out of the report of the internal complaint committee plays a very, very important role. And I feel that adequate training is missing. We have been affiliated with the ICD compliance at top government and private bodies. And when I say this, we have been working very, very hard. You know, it's again something which you really learn, and you learn every day. Nobody can expertise in this domain. We're learning from subjective experiences. Now, we have dealt with cases where, you know, somebody was harassed in a mid-flight by the CEO of the company while going overseas. If the whole company, if 20, 30 odd employees of a company are traveling, let's say, to London, and while the flight is over Abu Dhabi or somewhere, and this happens and the allegation surfaces as and when the flight lands, what do we do in that situation? It's not about jurisdiction. Now the issue is again, you know, do you have access to those witnesses? Other employees are subservient to the CEO. Can we summon the air hostess or somebody who was present in the flight as and when this happened? This is an international airline. The problem is with the subsequent dilemma which certain victims have faced. I've personally seen matters where the top officials have then come out with some kind of a witch hunt or a vendetta hunt against the so-called employee who had the audacity, who showed the guts to report this matter. In fact, I would lastly share an experience which is not strictly related to this topic, but in 2015, 2016, one complainant from a very, very remote village of Bihar came up to our office out of nowhere. She was traveling through a train, and they had this luggage in their hand. Her FIR in police station Mahila, PS Mahila, was 1 of 2016. Somehow the FIR was lodged, and on making certain inquiries, we lodged that we observed that in fact that village had not recorded any crime against women so far as married women is concerned, or crime against women at a workplace is concerned. The Mahila Thana, the purpose is totally different. The High Court gave certain reliefs to the accused in the matter. Imagine the plight. I mean, they don't have the resources. The legal aid at the High Court there had assisted the complainant in the matter. But when the matter reached the Supreme Court, this was then listed before Justice Khanwilkar. And I very clearly remember highlighting the factual metrics as to how certain matters are to be investigated and tried in entirety. The higher court had otherwise quashed the FIR, 1 of 2016. And without getting into the merits of the matter as such, without getting into the question of law, I won't say without getting into it, but the Supreme Court took note of the fact that this is one thing which was very, very important. This is very important, that if actual victims have come forward, they should be investigated in entirety, and considering other facts and circumstances, the order of the High Court was set aside. So it is the need of the hour that strong and real victims come forward, those who feel that they've been aggrieved and they feel that wrong has been committed which violates the provisions of this act or any other law timing in force, and they should come forward irrespective of the position. The law is very clear. Education is the need of the hour. The committee could even set aside or suspend, send on leave the top officials. The only issue is that we call it bread and butter paradigm. Imagine the CEO or the director, they're running the company, and a minor, employee who seems to have been sexually harassed, will they be able to last in the company? And again, the workforce is interlinked, everything seems to be interlinked. There is a issue with the, problem with the backfiring of such complaints. And that is also to be addressed. We hope that the jurisprudence will continue to develop. And I'm so grateful and I'm so happy and pleased to listen to Diksha Madam, Sunil Kumar sir, who had also aptly highlighted it's about education, it's about our thought process, which will eventually evolve with the advent of time and education into our system. And we should all thrive to continue towards a better workplace. And lastly, should also focus on the informal sector. That is the need of the hour. when 95% of our women workforce is in the informal sector, I think the major part remains unaddressed. Thank you, everyone. And students, you also, all of you, I've always had the pleasure of meeting you every now and then. I feel that you are the torch bearers as you go and, do compliance for these companies, joint judiciary litigation, be as it may. You would continue to, impart this knowledge and education and ensure that the provisions and otherwise the basic human rights of everyone is respected and fostered everywhere you go. Thank you so much. Thank you. And sorry about the internet connection. This is only today it has happened this way. Thank you.
Understand the technical glitches that we all are facing. Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the key points of the report that was just released yesterday regarding that how sexual harassment has just been now made a procedural requirement, and the lacunas in the law as well. And most importantly, the practical aspects that you stated relating to the case laws that you've been dealing with. I hope that will be really helpful for our students as they move in the professional space. As you rightly mentioned, that it's a learning process that we all are involved with, and particularly highlighting that how important it is to stretch the law not just for the formal sector but as well for the informal sector. Thank you so much, sir. It was really good listening to you. Now, from here, I'll be briefing the students regarding the topic, that is analyzing the scope of sexual harassment vis-a-vis Nisha Priya Bhatia case. So as we have already discussed on that what is sexual harassment, and as Diksha ma'am has also stated that sexual harassment actually is defined under section 2N of the Act. This particular section, students, it states that any of the following acts, whether directly or by implication, shall mean sexual harassment, and it includes in itself physical contact, advances, demands for sexual favors, or sexually colored remarks, or just showing pornography, or any other form of unwelcome physical, verbal, or conduct. Now, ma'am has already pointed out that what exactly is any other unwelcome physical or non-verbal conduct. But taking the objective of the act, it was quite evident that we are just considering the overt acts, but however forgetting the covert ones. The act under the section has further defined under section 3 has defined sexual harassment that it shall include any preferential treatment or detrimental treatment in the victim's employment, whether express or implied. Further, it also includes within itself implied or expressed threats about the victim's present or future employment status, and shall also include any sort of interference with the victim's work or creating an intimidating or hostile work or employment for her, or any form of humiliation which is likely to affect the victim's health or safety. Now here, the definition has a very broad interpretation and has a very wide meaning to it. And it provides for direct and implied sexual conduct, which may mean that what is implied sexual behavior for one person might not be a sexual behavior for the other person. Say suppose you have a friend and that person is having a conversation with you, that might not be a sexual conduct which you will take it in an offense manner, but however, that might be for the second person. So the definition gives a broader interpretation, and it further provides that any form of verbal or non-verbal conduct shall be included. Hence, mere statements or comments like come close to me or else you'll start feeling hot shall also depend upon the person, that yes, can be construed as the case of sexual harassment or not. The absence of any actual physical contact or attempt to molest the complainants does not make a difference. Just because there was no physical contact or an attempt to molest that was made, we cannot say that no, this was not a case of sexual harassment, because it is clearly that we have to read between the lines and understand that the difficulties which the complainants face while they have to submit these applications. Here, the Supreme Court has given a very wide interpretation to the word sexual harassment in the judgment of Nisha Priya Bhatia versus Union of India. This is a very important judgment that stands as a judgment that would highlight the definition and has broadened the scope and horizon of the definition of the sexual harassment. Now, in this case particularly, the facts, I'll just brief you about the facts quickly so that you can draw a backdrop to the case and the judgment that I discussed. So in this case particularly, what happened was that on 19/8/2008, Nisha Bhatia, she was a senior RAW officer. She attempted suicide in the reception of Prime Minister's office to protest the mishandling of her sexual harassment complaint by RAW. The appellant was directly recruited to RAW in year 1988. She was posted as the Director, Training Institute, Gurgaon, and also the Director at Delhi headquarters in July and August respectively. And it was while she was serving in this particular capacity that she filed a case of sexual harassment on 7/8/2007 against Mr. Alok Chaturvedi and Mr. Sunil Uke. They were secretary in charge of RAW, and Mr. Sunil was joint secretary in charge. She alleged that they had victimized her. Why? Because she had refused to join an internal sex racket that was running inside the organization also, with which she was offered that if you join this particular organization, you will be getting quicker promotions, and upon refusal to oblige the same, she was subjected to persecution. Here, the organization constituted the Internal Complaints Committee as it was required by the Vishakha guidelines after a gap of almost 3 months. However, the committee that was constituted, as the previous speakers have already mentioned, that the committee should have a third party, either from an NGO or the other body who is familiar with the issue of this sexual harassment, which is very well stipulated in the Vishakha judgment itself. However, the committee did not contain that, and here is where the lack has existed. The ICC, that is the Internal Complaints Committee, was ultimately reconstituted with an additional member named Ms. Tara Pathara, who was Director, National Security Council Secretary. She was added as a third-party member in April 2008, evidently which was also not again an NGO or any person associated with the harassment issues. Now, when the appellant refused to participate in the ICC proceedings, citing that this was in non-compliance with the Vishakha guidelines and the lack of the authority vested in ICC, proceeded against the Mr. Chaturvedi, and ICC passed an ex parte order concluding that there was no sexual harassment that was made out. Here, it was only after the incident that PM constituted an external committee under the chairmanship of female IS officer, which also concluded that the sexual harassment allegation was not proved here. However, the external committee did report that the appellant's complaint was not given proper redressal, and that Mr. Chaturvedi as an employee had committed gross violation of the Vishakha guidelines. However, they did stick to the fact that no sexual harassment allegation has been proved on record. Now here, the matter went up to the Supreme Court, and according to the court, the scheme of this particular act, that is 2013, Vishakha guidelines, and also the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, predicates that a non-hostile working environment is considered to be the basic limb of a dignified employment. Here, the Supreme Court was the opinion that the approach of the law as regards the case of sexual harassment of women at workplace is not just confined to the cases of actual commission of the acts of harassment, but also covers situation where the woman employee is subject to prejudice, hostility, or discriminatory attitude, as Diksha ma'am had given us various examples of discriminatory attitude. To quote a few, like, say suppose you have to choose, the organization has to choose for a committee of members, and there a discrimination has been made that because she is a female, she won't be able to do this, or because she's a male, because he's a male, he would do it better. So this sort of discriminatory attitude and the humiliation that the lady suffers in the day-to-day functioning at the workplace shall also be covered under the word sexual harassment, and not necessarily that you have to prove that some sort of act has been done, some sort of attempts of molestation have been made to make it a case of sexual harassment. And talking about the present case, the court held that taking any other view would completely defeat the purpose of the law, and the petitioner has faced an insensitive and an undignified circumstance due to the improper handling of a complaint of sexual harassment. Therefore, regardless of the outcome of the inquiry into the stated complaint, the fundamental rights of the petitioner has been clearly infringed. Now, this particular judgment marks as an important step in the Indian sexual harassment jurisprudence. In the United States, the scholars have critiqued sexual harassment law for being just a desired dominance paradigm, which places that inappropriate sexual advances by the women towards the female colleagues at the center of the problem. That is, only if some sexual advances have been made, then only we'll say it, and this has been critiqued again and again. Why? Because this ignores the underlying structures of the gender discrimination at the workplace, which is facilitating such a behavior. In the present case, Mr. Chaturvedi, he had allegedly made comments to the appellants that instead of being worried about the promotions or instead of being worried about the work, she should actually go and take care of the children and have fun with people. And she, being a lady, she should not be involved, she should not be caring about such career or promotions. Okay? The appellant's grievances did just not stem out of the supervisors pressurizing them to join a sex racket, but from the overall discriminatory attitude and a general organizational unwillingness to impose the consequences of this sexist behavior. So the desired dominance paradigm is apparent in the Indian sexual harassment law also, because we see that it's there in the Vishakha guidelines also, and also in the POSH. However, it's because it defines that sexual harassment only in terms of unwelcome sexual behavior, and completely excludes other non-sexual forms of gender-based discrimination. The creation of the hostile work environment is treated as a sexual harassment only when it is connected with the unwelcome sexual behavior, though employers are generally obligated to ensure the safe working environment. Here, Vishakha guidelines also do say that it is in clear violation of Article 14 or 15 for that matter, and 21. But again, it is completely silent on the Article 16, that is about the employment opportunity. And there's no legal framework particularly that recognizes sexual harassment as a form of employment discrimination also. Therefore, this judgment of Nisha Priya Bhatia is radical insofar as it expressly recognizes that regardless of whether her allegation is proved or not, a female employee, as a matter of constitutional right, may claim the compensatory remedies from her employer for the creation of an hostile environment at the workplace. Further, this is treated as a distinct violation from the conventional definition of the sexual harassment as the commission of unwelcome sexual acts, though the decision notes that the victim may claim a higher amount of compensation if such incidents are proved. In the particular judgment, the words prejudice and discriminatory are also given a wider interpretation, and hence any sort of any sort of discrimination in gender, caste, or class-based discrimination within the female employees also at the workplace shall be considered to be the cases of which shall be covered under the definition 2N and 3, read in section 3. Now, here we can just hope that in the due course of time, this protection will be extended to all the genders and sexualities who experience this discrimination on account of non-conforming standards of the workplace. So the sexual harassment, as stated by the judgment, it's not just the express sexual conduct by an employer, but however, any covert acts also shall be included for the purpose of the definition. That is all from my end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arushi ma'am, for an extended, I always believe that bringing case laws and case stories and trying to make people to connect through decided cases is always something which make another way of learning and understanding the law and legal process. And with this particular session that we have done with all our panelists, first of all, I would communicate to you all, Diksha ma'am have a meeting of Lok Adalat, and Sushil sir also have a meeting for Lok Adalat. So Diksha ma'am had to attend the meeting at 1 o'clock. So she has went into the meeting. So she has conveyed her regards to all the panelists in front of us and all the students who are present. She has communicated her gratitude for coming and joining in good number and listening to and attending an important session. So this is a gesture from all of us that we find it important. We find it relevant. We find it something which is worth giving time. So when we listen to these things, what Sushil sir has highlighted, what Sanjay sir has highlighted, what Arushi ma'am and Diksha ma'am highlighted, when we listen, then we will be in a position to understand, then we will be in a position to research and make our opinion, and then we will be in a position to imbibe these things in our life and communicate to all the people. So lawyers are lawyer is someone who is working at all spheres, in all ways, making things possible in the court, outside the court, in the society, as a teacher, as a judge, as an advocate, as a philosopher, as a researcher, as a social reformer. So, I mean, it is not that we will wait for 5 years to make any change in our attitude or in the society or in the vicinity or at our workplace. It is always the day you decide, it is always today that we have to start creating a situation, a process while we talk to our female colleagues, how we behave with them, how we kind of arrange ourselves, our oral communication, our communication by way of our eyes, our hands, by showing gestures while we call them, while we talk to them, while we sit around them, while we travel, and while we sit in the classroom, while we teach to them, while we address them as a teacher, as a student, as a colleague, as a elder, as a younger. So I have a duty, unless all of us have to think that I have a duty, and I have a duty to maintain myself in such a fashion that my colleague, the person who is in front of me should not feel offended, not only within the precinct of law, but also in the precinct of morality. So it is not going to hamper, even if she do not complain, that does not mean that I am justified. Even if she doesn't complain and I have done something which I should not do, it is immoral. It is outside the value system. And everyone by his own work creates its value. Value is not something that we create by our bank balance. Value is something that we create by our conduct, our attitude, our behavior, the way we organize ourselves in our workplace, in our social life, in our friendship, in our college life. So I have been part of a lot of ICC meetings, and I have, sorry to say, I have been almost in my 17 years being part of almost disciplinary committees of the student in every law school I have been. And I have the wrong example of punishing girls and boys both on multiple occasions for their acts which are not permissible in law and which are not permissible in the code of conduct of the institution. So it is important. Why this session today? It is not only for the purpose that we are creating awareness for the students to know the law. We are creating and sensitizing our students that they should organize themselves in the law school and outside the law school also, at their home, at their workplace, at their internship place, whenever they go to their senior, when they join the bar or bench or their office, whenever they go to the market, whenever they meet their, so this session is to make you only aware. This is just 1% of what we wanted to convey you. So you have to start reading what Sanjay sir has highlighted, the report which has come of the Human Rights Committee. What Arushi ma'am have highlighted, the case, we have to read that case. What Sushil sir have highlighted, the historical and modern perspective, both. What Diksha ma'am have highlighted, the whole legislation she has briefed to us. So it is our duty now that we have to read and we have to sensitize. We have to make sure that our vicinity have to be cleaned from all these nonsense, nuisance, unlawful, immoral, valueless behavior and conduct of ourselves, of our mistakes, or anybody who is around. When we will make ourselves better, then we will be in a position to make others adjust to that situation. If we will not keep these things in our mind, if we will not be an advocate of such things, then we will compromise. So I would not take much time. I am thankful from the core of my heart to Sushil Kumar sir for joining today. I am thankful to the core of my heart, from the core of my heart, to my friend and my support and always a person who is standing for us, Sanjay Vashishta sir, and someone who has a live experiences of disciplinary committees in the Delhi High Court, in the Supreme Court, in the institutions which a lot of you knows and speaks every day, be it have been in Jamia, have been in Canada, have been in Oxford, and now in Delhi High Court, practicing and being part of the standing council of various universities and being part of the disciplinary committee of various institutions and universities and hospitals also, and also being a regular in the Delhi Police Foundation and Delhi Police Academy, teaching Delhi Police how to conduct themselves. I mean, he has taken more than 280 sessions in Delhi Police Academy, how they have to conduct themselves. And I hope this must be a part of their work culture. So he's someone who has briefed us thoroughly. And because of short of time, he only highlighted the flip side of the issue. And Sushil sir, being a judicial officer, being a secretary of the DLSA, sir is now going to take up the Lok Adalat tomorrow and have been CJM in Bareilly and now in Greater Noida, have been taking up all these issues and vociferously and speaking and advocating all these issues. I'm so thankful to you, sir, for your presence today and enlightening our students on this occasion. I'm thankful to Diksha ma'am in her absence and to Professor Arushi ma'am. She has conducted the session very well and she has taken the right perspective of taking the session to a situation where we can learn things and we can understand things from a practical perspective. There are, I can see, many questions which are here I think around hundreds of questions from the students. With the permission of Sushil sir, I would only take the questions. With the permission of Sanjay sir, I would only be able to take the questions. Because of the time constraint, I would seek their permission if we can take up 1 or 2 questions.
Okay, sir.
Sir, can we take up questions?
Sir, I would humbly request if 1 or 2 questions only. My matter in the High Court as discussed is about to reach.
So,
I'm getting.
Yes, sir. What we can do, if you write down your email ID, students can write questions to you, and you can reply sometime later.
I will be very, very grateful, sir. As a counsel, my other eye is on the virtual display board and the calls that I'm so sorry.
No
sir,
problem,
this is
no
my
problem.
own college.
We are so thankful to you for presence today. Students, Sanjay sir will
all
write his
email
ID in the chat box, and
I will write my email, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Surely. Also, Sushil sir is supposed to take up the meeting of his office for the Lok Adalat. So I am also announcing today. We have a Lok Adalat tomorrow and day after. Sushil sir, tomorrow and day after?
जी सर.
लोक अदालत आज है, कल है, कल और परसों?
नहीं, परसों है. आज इसकी मीटिंग है आज.
सर, आज मीटिंग है और संडे को लोक अदालत है ना?
जी सर.
So I would announce to all of you, if any of you have any matters in the Greater Noida Court which is related to motor accident or motor vehicle, or which is related to family matters. Am I right, Sushil sir?
जी सर, हाँ. मोटर एक्सीडेंटल क्लेम ट्रिब्यूनल के मामले और फैमिली कोर्ट के मामलों की सुनवाई होगी लोग.
So all of you who have any such matter or related matter, you can approach not sir, don't approach sir, you can approach the Lok Adalat. After tomorrow we have Lok Adalat. Kindly attend that and convey to your relatives who have any matter. Thank you so much, everyone. Also, there is a Lok Adalat in Mathura, so don't approach Diksha ma'am. Kindly approach the Lok Adalat for the redressal of the matter. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
So
thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay. Thank you.